We have a mascot, or at least a picture of one. We're going to talk about image generation with Stable Cascade. Interesting. A bit more about LangChain4J, especially with its tool support. Air Canada learns a harsh AI lesson. And the usual collection of silly tweets, toots, and skeets. Welcome to Tales from the Jar Side. Welcome to Tales from the Jar Side. My name is Ken Cousin. This is my free weekly newsletter. Let's dive right in. After the initial welcome, I'll say that this is the newsletter for the week of February 11th through 18th, 2024. This week I had a couple of classes. I taught my deep dive into the Spring Framework and my Modern Java Functional Programming course, at least the part on streams, lambdas, method references, and related topics. Both of those were no fluff, just stuff virtual workshops. The regular info message is regular readers of and listeners to, and of course video viewers of this newsletter are affectionately known as jarheads and are far more intelligent, sophisticated, and attractive than the average newsletter reader or listener or viewer. If you wish to become a jarhead, please subscribe either using the button on the newsletter or at the YouTube channel. As a reminder, you can always, if the email is truncated, if it runs long, you can click on the title and that'll open it up in a separate browser and everything formatted nicely. Now, the first topic this week is about Jarvis, the Tales from the Jar Side robot mascot. Yeah, okay. The plan was to talk about Stable Cascade, and I'll get to that in a moment. But when I was generating images with Stable Cascade, I decided to compare it to what I could get from DALL-E 3, which is what I use most of the time. I just go into GPT-4 and ask it to generate an image, and that winds up using DALL-E 3. So this time, as you can see this nice little picture here, the original prompt was draw a 16:9 image of a happy robot reading the Tales from the Jar Side newsletter on a laptop. And as it is wont to do, it regenerated the prompt a little bit more elaborate. The prompt now says a cheerful robot in a 16:9 aspect ratio image sitting comfortably and reading the Tales from the Jar Side newsletter on a laptop. The robot has a friendly humanoid appearance, true, with a visible expression of happiness. I guess that's the smiley. It's positioned in a cozy setting, perhaps a home office or a related workplace with a laptop open in front of it. The newsletter on the laptop screen is clearly labeled Tales from the Jar Side. The surroundings are warm and inviting with soft lighting and a few personal touches to make the space look lived in and welcoming. And I gotta admit, I think it looks adorable. I think that's a great one, and I'm really surprised at how well it rendered the words Tales from the Jar Side. You could see we got a little bit of weirdness in here. That title says News Het or something weird like that. I guess it came from the word newsletter somehow. But okay, so be it. I'll go with it. And then I went to GPT-4 and said, hey, I need a name for this robot. What do you got? What do you think? And it said, how about naming it Jarvis? It's a playful nod to the Tales from the Jar Side newsletter, suggesting intelligence and helpfulness, much like a personal assistant. Plus, it has a friendly and accessible sound to it. Well, yeah, but Jarvis was the robot in the Iron Man movies and later in the Avengers movies, and eventually got converted into or embedded in the robot that became Vision. Complicated, to say the least. And Jarvis, as I recall, even at the time, was an acronym, which I'm not going to bother looking up. It was contrived anyway. So do I really want to reuse that name? It seems a little bit ambitious there. But on the other hand, the Tftjs, the Tales from the Jar Side Jarvis, bears about as much resemblance to the movie Jarvis as I do to Tony Stark. The classic statement, genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist. And I'm afraid that overeducated, thousandaire, married Patreon supporter doesn't quite have the same ring to it. I'm going to go with it. What the heck? Welcome aboard. Now, the big problem, by the way, is if I wanted to get pictures of Jarvis in any other setting or any other pose or anything else, there's really no reliable way of doing that. I can go back to the same chat with GPT and say, okay, put that same robot in a different setting, and I can assure you the robot will look nothing like this one. I mean, I asked it, I said, how do I get the same robot again? And it said, describe it. And I'm like, yeah. So, okay, I've got one picture and we'll see how that goes. I got to find somewhere to use that. We'll see. Okay, moving on. Now, again, the whole point of that section, what started out in that section, was the idea of Stable Cascade. I watched a video by one of the YouTubers I follow a lot. His name is Matt Wolf, and he keeps up on AI news. He's very good about it. And he discussed there were a lot of things going on this week, but the one that didn't get quite the same press, but I thought was interesting, was this one called Stable Cascade. Now, the YouTube video where he discussed it in detail was called How to Make Professional Logos with AI for Free. You log into Hugging Face, go to the Stable Cascade page, select a free space, and add a prompt. So just to show you what this looks like, I'll go directly to the Stable Cascade page here. There it is. This is at Hugging Face, and there's Stable Cascade. And down here it says spaces using this. The first one here is multimodal art /Stable Cascade, and you could put in your prompt, and they said, oh, how about an astronaut riding on a green horse? Well, let's see. Now that one's probably in its cache because it came up with that awfully quickly. A mecha robot in a favela. Now let's see. How about a happy robot reading a newsletter? And you see that it takes about a minute, maybe less, to generate, and that's not bad. It's a little, it was blurry there for a second, but I guess I just hadn't waited it out yet. I'm actually pretty pleased with that. Let's say, well, first of all, let me save that one. Image wasn't available on the site, huh? Makes me worry about it. Save image as, we'll do that. Okay, a newsletter on a laptop. Whoops. Typo. Let's see what that winds up doing. Okay, it understood. Not terrible. I mean, I'm not generating an icon or anything. Let's make it an icon. An icon of a happy robot reading a newsletter on a laptop, and see what we get out of that. I did a bunch of experiments this week, and okay, that's less good. That's got the DALL-E 2 feeling to it. How about if I say reading the Tales from the Jar Side newsletter on a laptop, and see what that does? Not a lot different. It's interesting that all the laptops so far that's been generating have been Macs. See the little Apple logo on there. I wonder what Apple would have to say about that. Anyway, back to the newsletter. So I tried a logo of a happy robot drinking coffee while reading the Tales from the Jar Side newsletter, and I got this, which, that's not too bad. But then I tried it again and got this weirdness, and it's like, okay, now I'm dealing with an AI image generator. I'm not sure whether it took the term jar literally, or that's actually a coffee cup. I mean, it's got a handle on it and everything, but why is it in the coffee? I have no idea. So, at any rate, that's Stable Cascade. Have fun, enjoy if you want. Another thing I was looking at this week was a bit more with LangChain4J. LangChain4J is the Java API based on the Python library called LangChain, although it's pretty different. And it's a front end on various AI providers. It's a framework. And one of the interesting features of it that I've really never played with is what they call tool support. And the LangChain4J examples project uses as an example a calculator class. So here's a method called add that takes two ints and return an int and just adds them up. And notice the tool annotation that describes what it does. So the idea is when you make your AI assistant, whatever that is, that's an interface in the examples, you can add that calculator in the tools along with some memory. They always want some chat memory with this. I'm not sure why they want that for the tools, but any way they do. And then when you ask it a question, if it decides it needs it, it will use the tools. The example they have in the LangChain4J examples project has to do with saying, give me the square root of the sum of the lengths of the words in this sentence. So it's got 3 words, it figures out their lengths, it adds them up, it does a square root, and there are 3 functions in the example in the calculator, 1 to add, 1 to get the length of a string, and 1 to take the square root. And it does it, it's great. So I decided to try it with an example that I've been playing with, the person extractor. I use that as an example. It's related to one they also have. And I basically say, I've got a person record, and I put it in the class path, and I say, give me an instance of this record, extracting the data from the following description. So I wrote here, Captain Picard was born in Le Bar, France, on Earth. I don't know why I said it like that, I'm sorry. On the 13th of Juillet, 281 years in the future. His given name, Jean-Luc, is of French origin. He and his brother Robert were raised in the family vineyard Chateau Picard. Not sure why I said they were in the vineyard, but I was just trying to distract it a little bit. And of course, what I want is this, and the only really uncertain part of that is the year. So it should be able to pull 13th of July. I mean, translating from French should be nothing for an AI tool. And we specified the given name and the surname there in the passage. So the only real question is it going to figure out what 281 years in the future is? Now, of course, part of that's going to be when its training data ended, because even if it does add correctly, it's going to add it from whenever its training set terminated there. But I want that. So, and I got to tell you, sometimes I get that. And it depends on whether I use GPT-3 or GPT 3.5 or GPT-4. Depends on lots of different things. But this one I got, for example, from GPT 3.5 once with my logging in there. It said, okay, it called the subtract function that I put in with 281 and the current year according to it, which is last year. That's when its training data ended. And then again, it called add with 7 and 13. And the 13 I get from, well, the 13 came from the 13th of Juillet, and I'm assuming the 7 came from the month there. But I don't really know. And of course, the year is completely wildly off, you know. So that's what happened when I tried it with GPT 3.5 Turbo. Now, when I call with GPT-4, I get the right answer a lot. But most of the times when I get the right answer, it doesn't call the functions. It just gets the right answer. Sometimes it gets it, sometimes it doesn't. GPT 3.5 Turbo is a lot less reliable. And as you see here, I was off by 563 years. So that's a problem. Now, I got to say that I have fixed this problem a little bit today. In between writing the newsletter and recording this, I've been thinking about it, and I've been looking into it, and I now understand that this tool support is basically a front end on the function capability in the OpenAI API. And with the function capability, it's absolutely critical that you specify exactly what this thing does. In other words, I shouldn't have just given it an add function. What I wound up giving it, and I'll put this in the video when I make it, it's a function called years from now, basically that matches this. I could have called it in the future, but I changed the prompt to years from now. And now I have a function called years from now that takes an int, which is the number of years from now, and it returns an int and it calculates the number of years. So that one is working much better, and even GPT 3.5 is using it appropriately and working. Now, of course, that was my chance to go off on a rant saying the whole thing was not repeatable. Every time I run it, basically, I can get wildly different answers. And I said, it reminded me of how kids do their homework in math classes that, oh, they've got some function they know they're supposed to use, so they just start pulling numbers out of the problem description and plugging them in, whether they mean anything or not. In other words, they just don't understand the underlying principle, and yeah, neither does an AI. That figures. But now that I think I understand that a little better, I'm going to start playing with that a bit more and see if I can come up with some really interesting examples. However, I like the idea of talking about the tool support not being used correctly. So I asked DALL-E 3 to design an image that shows the parrot logo, the one from LangChain, and say, show it misusing some tools And that's when it came up with the hammer and other those tools on the desk and smashing it. It's supposed to be a calculator in there, but whatever. And of course, it messed up the word LangChain4J a little bit there. I had to edit that, but still not bad. And I like the fact that the hammer's pointed the wrong way and all those question marks. I mean, that's pretty effective at getting the point across. So that'll probably be something related to the thumbnail in the next video. Okay, let's move on. Air Canada learns a harsh lesson about AI. So you might have noticed this news item, which I have linked here. Air Canada found liable for chatbot's bad advice on plane tickets. Turned out a grieving guy by the name of Jake Moffat wanted to book a flight on Air Canada for his grandmother's funeral, but wasn't sure about their refund policy on bereavement flights. And Air Canada had a chatbot on its website. And when Moffat asked the chatbot about bereavement flights, they claimed he could submit his ticket for reimbursement after the flight for a reduced rate within 90 days of the date it was issued. So we did that, and he booked it and submitted for a refund afterwards. And it got turned down. Air Canada doesn't have policy like that, not on bereavement flights. And the chatbot just made it up. I mean, which it's inclined to do. So Moffat submitted his ticket and they denied it. And he said, wait a minute, I used your chatbot. And they said, yeah, sorry, no. And he had to sue to get any satisfaction. And this week the court said, yeah, you put it up there. You've got to abide by what it says. And that's one of a number of examples like that. I mean, that auto dealership where somebody negotiated a sale price of $1 or something like that. I mean, there's a bunch of them out there. And it's really crazy, the argument it tried to make. I mean, it tried to argue that the chatbot was a separate legal entity that is responsible for its own actions. It's like people aren't going to assume that you said it. I actually talked about this in an earlier video. I mean, it's a video I put out back in, I think, November called When Your Own Custom GPT Won't Behave. And I just put on the front cover, don't blame me for my GPT. And when I make a presentation about this in the future, it's going to be something like custom GPTs for fun, profit, and potential liability, right? So I like this phrase, which occurred to me as I was writing this up. I wish I'd thought of it earlier. You brand it, you bought it. I mean, if it's got your name on it, people are going to assume you're agreeing with it, that it's representing you. And when you use ChatGPT and it's wrong, you blame ChatGPT or OpenAI or somebody like that. But if a company brands it with their own branding, they're going to assume that's what you meant. And the courts agreed. Yes. Now, of course, the real scandal is the arrogance of Air Canada. Instead of going, oh, wow, that's really a mistake. All right, well, we'll let it go this time and then disable the chatbot. No. They tried to refuse under any circumstances and pay all the court costs instead, to take this to court over an amount of money that wouldn't fund their operations for an hour, much less a day. I mean, appalling. Okay, let's do our tweets and toots. So, but they're both so old. So this one's got Gandalf and Saruman, and the J.R.R. Tolkien news, Twitter feed says, but they're both so old. Gandalf can barely remember his passwords and even forgot that people called him Gandalf. Yikes. While Saruman betrayed the free peoples of Middle-earth and led an insurrection that stormed Helm's Deep. You can see how they're equally bad choices. But the reply I also liked. The reply was, OMG, what happened at Helm's Deep was a peaceful protest. Any violence was clearly Gondor operatives in disguise. Besides, Saruman is immune from any prosecution from his acts on that day, as they were part of his official duties as head of the Order of the Astari. Yeah, good luck with that one. Saruman, of course, given the way that's all played out, Saruman might need to sell the One Ring to pay for all those judgments against him. I think Sauron will go along with it. Now, of course, is Trump Saruman or Sauron in that scenario? And maybe he's Saruman and Putin is Sauron. I mean, it depends how you want to play it. Anyway, this one says, easy mistake to make, and the mostly harmless feed on Mastodon said, I hate it when I mean to buy seedless grapes, but instead I accidentally get, well, you know, Oreos? Yeah, that could happen to anybody. I totally understand. This one I titled, Leonardo Would Like a Word, and it says, Michelangelo was only 24 years old when he completed the Pieta sculpture, and that's gorgeous. It's amazing. But the response is even better. The fact that he was a turtle makes it 10 times more fascinating. So Leonardo and Donatello, and yeah, you get the idea. Okay. Subtle differences. This one I like too. It says, for those of you who don't know the difference between a crocodile and an alligator, the crocodile is the one next to the alligator. And yes, it is. I'm 99% sure the one on the left is the alligator with the blunt nose and the crocodile's on the right, but I did not bother looking it up. I do know the old gag, of course, you've probably heard it many times, that you can tell them apart because alligator you see later, but crocodiles you see after a while. Screenshot, you know. This comment about Pop-Tarts says if you eat a toaster pastry without cooking it first, that's called Pop-Tartar. Again, rim shot on that one. I meant to include the news item in last week's newsletter about the inventor of the Pop-Tart. William Post passed away at the age of 96. And point out that, see, despite what you might have heard, all those preservatives in Pop-Tarts obviously lead to a long, happy life. I mean, he made it to 96. I'm also going to state without any discussion that frosted brown sugar cinnamon Pop-Tarts are fantastic. They rule. And I will not be taking any questions at this time. Yes. This one says impressive, and it's, of course, a Russian nesting doll saying, if you think that's impressive, the kangaroo with the baby in the pouch, I'm about to blow your mind. Yes, the Russian nesting doll with however many dolls are nested inside it, right? And my only comment was, is it just me, or shouldn't she be saying that in Russian? I mean, sure. One Super Bowl follow-up is this comment here that said, my favorite thing about the Taylor Swift, quote, controversy is the new term I've learned to perfectly describe the weak, fragile, quote, alpha males who are so easily threatened by strong women, broflakes. Yeah, that's good. I like that one. Although I've come up with a term that I like is conservadorks, which is a bit more gender neutral, so you can use that anywhere. Rim shot again, I suppose. Okay, and this one I labeled, hurry, call IXII. Should American schools teach Arabic numerals as part of their curriculum? And 57% are saying no. And I, you know, this is an old gag. I've seen that for decades, really. I mean, who knows if anybody actually did that survey, or they're just repeating the gag with made up numbers. But yeah, I wouldn't, it has the ring of plausibility about it, which is why nobody checks to see if there ever was a survey like that. It's just, it sounds like it could be. Yeah, let's move on. I think this is a good joke, but it might not be. It says, Dickens, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And Schrodinger's response is, nice. M shot. Heisenberg isn't sure, of course. Yes. Okay, and then finally, a really, really old and bad dad joke, but not as bad as some of the ones I've used before. The fact that some people can't distinguish between etymology and entomology bugs me in ways I can't put into words. Rim shot. Now that reminds me, of course, I forgot to do the subtitle, so let's check that real quick. It says, I ran out of food and had to steal from my neighbor's herb garden. Now I'm living on borrowed time. Yeah, that one's really, really awful. I do apologize on that. At any rate, hopefully this week I have the new video coming out on tools support in LangChain, but I'm looking for some more really interesting examples. A lot of people have talked about function support in OpenAI. I'd like to see if I could add something unique or interesting to it. You know, they say it's fine to borrow from others as long as you make it better. You know, I'll be seeing what I can figure out. But that is the plan. I have my regular Trinity course, and Tuesday night, I've got Paul King as a guest lecturer, and that'll be awesome. He's a personal hero of mine. Paul King is the current head of the Groovy framework, but I've known him for many, many years, and a very impressive guy. So at any rate, please feel free to subscribe if you don't want to miss any of the upcoming videos and the newsletters and everything. And I'll say, okay, let's cue that theme song, also AI generated. Take care, everybody.
Hey there, Des, it's time to tune in to Tales from the Jar, so let's begin. Java, Kotlin, and Spring, oh my. Groovy, Gradle, don't be shy. Tales from the Jar side, oh yeah. Crack open the code, let's take a ride. From design patterns to the latest trends, your weekly tech toast that never ends.